Hi, it's Lori Morse, and I wanted to just take a few minutes and be with you so we could talk about healthy hearts. Um, it's interesting to me that there are scores of women, actually, and I know this because I've talked to them over decades. And the interesting part is that when numbers like blood pressure or cholesterol or blood glucose start to rise a little bit in lab values and whatnot, women still don't realize that those are significant signs from the body that they're actually facing themselves and walking themselves toward the doorstep of heart disease. And uh, I find that a very curious thing because a lot of the women that I know that I work with do have blood pressure values that are creeping up, or heart or cholesterol that's creeping up, or blood glucose values that are moving in the wrong direction. Actually, that's an interesting one to me, blood glucose, because if you go in for blood work and you fasted, so you go in the next day and you haven't eaten anything since midnight before and you have your blood drawn, the fasting blood glucose value, it's the same thing as our blood sugar. The range is really big. It's like between 80 and 120. And if it's 82, that's not so bad. But if it starts getting in the high 80s, the 90s, or even the low 100s, nobody really says anything to her because it's still in range. And I just find that to be not okay, because if anyone is walking themselves toward the wrong door, the earlier that they are pointed back in the right direction, the better, right? So, um, if a value falls within range, there doesn't seem to be much of a noise made about it. It's only when the person is knocking on the door of diabetes because their blood sugar now is so high, and that happens over a period of time. It doesn't happen overnight. Um, then the doctor says, oh, well, you've got to get your blood sugar down, you've got to change your diet, you've got to lower those numbers. But she could have been told 5 years ago that these are key indicators of health and heart struggle, right? So, and of course, if there's inflammation involved, all of those blood pressure, cholesterol, blood glucose, inflammation, all of those are important signals and indicators and messages of intelligence from our body, by the way, that some things need to start to change, right? It's interesting also to me that when you look up on Google, if you Google like how to, what are the symptoms of heart disease, or how can you keep heart disease from manifesting, really what comes up is mostly the symptoms of a heart event, like a heart attack, for example. So, jaw pain or left arm pain, which isn't as common for women as it is for men, but still everybody knows that symptom. And if you actually don't know the symptoms of a heart event or a heart attack, someone having a heart attack, for women, because they are a little different than they are for men, it's really worth your 5 minutes of your time to go check those out and know what they are. It could be life saving, either for yourself or for another human. Um, but dizziness and lightheaded and pain that spreads to the arm, like I already said, and sometimes nausea or indigestion or even heartburn or stomach pain, all those can be referred pains from a heart struggle, a heart that is struggling and is looking right in the eyes of a heart event. So, but it doesn't really say, that I was able to find on Google, like how to manage the situation way earlier on. And so I wanted to do a very mini live reading from my upcoming book, Reverse Your Heart Disease Naturally, A Woman's Guide to Not Die Before It's Too Early, Before Your Time. And I wanted to do this live reading because I'm a couple months uh, out from the book actually being published, which will be in December. And then I'm going to do a lot more longer live readings. But this is a short and simple one, just to um, sort of say what's true, to talk about the elephant that's in the room, and to hopefully save a few lives on the earlier side rather than on the later side of the journey towards heart disease. And it'll make more sense once I read. So let me get over to my book here. And You're of course I'm going to be there's going to be a period of time when the electronic book comes out in December, and then there'll be a print book coming out later, but there'll be a period of time where I'm giving the book away for free. So if you want to be on the list for a free copy of the book, just put your name in the chat box, and I'll make sure that you are on that list. So let me start here. What I've discovered is that there are some vital ingredients to a heart health recipe, and that few even address some of those ingredients. Yes, it's important to eat whole food, and we'll talk about that more in the nutrition chapter. There's a chapter on nutrition. There's actually 7 steps to a healthy heart, and some of the ones that are common that we know of, like nutrition and movement, those are addressed in my book, but there are some that aren't even ever talked about in mainstream medicine. So yes, it's important to move your body for cardiovascular health, and we'll talk about that too. Yes, it's imperative, I already said that, but I actually had to dig deeper, and it took a while to find the treasure. But I did find it, and you'll get the scoop on all of that treasure as we journey through these pages together. As well, you'll learn how to weave it into your world so that you can live your natural design of a long, healthy life. As we know, a recipe is made up of particular ingredients. If some of those ingredients are left out, the intended recipe doesn't work as well. It's a simple message hidden in plain sight. So if you tell someone you're going to make a quiche and you leave out the eggs, like one of the primary ingredients in a quiche, then you can't really call it a quiche. I mean, if you're doing a plant-based quiche, then you might substitute the eggs for something else, but then you might call it a mock quiche. But a plain, flat-out, everyday quiche is usually made with eggs. And leaving that ingredient out doesn't make for the best outcome of the recipe, right? So if as many as half of the heart disease cases aren't able to be linked to traditional risks such as family history, obesity, high blood pressure, cholesterol, or sugar, smoking, or too little activity, then what other ingredients are missing? This is the question I had. This is the question that drove me to write this book. And for the half that can be linked to traditional risks, and we know heart disease is reversible, then why isn't that happening more? Why isn't death by heart disease on the decline rather than on the rise? So the statistics show that some statistics say 1 in 4, some say 1 in 5 women die of heart disease. That's 20 to 25% of our women are dying from a heart disease that's reversible. This is why it's important to consider that if you have even a slight risk factor, then that means you're looking in that direction and you're heading towards that door called heart disease, and you don't want to be heading in that direction. So let's read what Dr. Michael Greger has to say about it. So, quote, "The most likely reason most of our loved ones will die is heart disease. It's up to each of us to make our own decisions about what to eat and how to live. But we should make these decisions consciously by educating ourselves about the predictable consequences of our actions. Atherosclerosis, or hardening of the arteries, begins in childhood. The arteries of nearly all kids raised on standard American diet already have fatty streaks, marking the first stages of disease by the time they are 10 years old. After that, the plaques start forming in our 20s, gets worse in our 30s, and then can start killing us off from there. In our heart, it's called a heart attack, and in our brain, it can manifest as a stroke. So for anyone reading this who is older than 10 years old, the choice isn't whether or not to eat healthfully to prevent heart disease. It's whether or not you want to reverse the heart disease you likely already have." End quote. That was startling to me to learn that the disharmony in the body starts at such a young age. I actually didn't know that. I find it interesting that scores of women who have, and I said this just a minute ago, this is now in the book, that it's interesting that scores of women who have either high blood pressure, rising blood sugar, or cholesterol or inflammation don't think they have heart disease. The signs are right there in front of her face, yet she doesn't see it. And it may be that the disease is on the rise because either people aren't seeing that there's an elephant in the room, or they see it but ignore it because it's so big. If a woman at risk makes specific changes, she could literally change her risk markers within 3 weeks. If she kept that up, she could absolutely keep herself from knocking on the door of heart disease. She could keep the Titanic from hitting the iceberg, so to speak. So I just wanted to offer this mini live reading as food for thought, because if you're a woman who has any of those pre markers for heart disease, you can't say you don't have heart disease, as I keep hearing over and over from women who I know very I know for sure have those markers. So I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here, but I want to alert women that there are things that you can do that are so simple and so contributory to reversing your heart disease. So stay tuned. As I said, the book will be out in December and it's in editing rounds right now. And I will be happy to gift you a copy of the book. If this is you or if you have loved ones who fall into this category, let me know and I will get you a copy of the book. And until then, bye for now in creative love and healthy heart wholeness. Lori Morse.